BBC.
Hello, welcome to Witness with me, Rob Walker. Today we're heading back to 1930s England in the time of the Great Depression. And we'll be delving into the BBC's archives to tell the story of the Yarrow Crusade, a march from the north of England to London to protest about chronic poverty and mass unemployment. In early 1936, the small town of Yarrow was in despair. Like other areas of Britain reliant on heavy industry, the northeast of England had been badly hit by the global economic depression. But in Yarrow, conditions were particularly harsh.
Pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. The Yarrow of those days was a filthy, dirty, fallen down, consumptive area in which the infantile death rate was the highest in the country, and TB was a general condition.
These Yarrow residents explained to the BBC in 1986 what life had been like for them in the 1930s.
Oh yes. I mean, we used to lie in bed till dinner time to save a meal, and that's the real truth.
People has forgotten. People don't realise what it was like up here.
The main source of employment in Yarrow had been the local shipyard, but that finally closed down in 1934, and the majority of working-age men found themselves with no job and little hope of finding one. Bill Sternberg was a journalist in Yarrow at the time.
Everybody was heartbroken. They couldn't believe it. It really went home that this was the end. Everybody was shattered that such a thing could have happened to them. It went right through society, and in spite of this terrible thing that was taking place, these people kept tremendous pride. They had an almost defiant pride.
And that pride made it particularly hard for men no longer able to provide for their families. Jean Clark, with a job in the town hall, became the breadwinner for her family after her father lost his job. She spoke to the BBC in 1976.
It was rather hard, I think, on the family as well to watch a rather loved father. Just week by week you could see them getting a little more morose, trying to keep cheerful. But the effect it had on them, you could begin to see it showing in their faces. Judging from my own father, sitting in a chair, you know, head on hand, dreaming.
Calls for help from the government produced no response. So, in the summer of 1936, the town council in Yarrow took the initiative. With the support of churches and businesses, it was decided that 200 unemployed men would march the 300 miles to London and present a petition to Parliament demanding that new industries be established in the town.
The effect on the men in Yarrow was quite astonishing, really. You've got to appreciate that because of unemployment, they lived a pretty mundane sort of existence for months and some of them years, you see. Now the idea of a march to London, of course, excited them.
Sam Rowan was a young clerk working for the local council. He was given the job of organising food and accommodation during the 3 weeks it would take the marchers to reach London.
The fact that 1,400 volunteered to go would give you some idea, and for the 200 who were picked to go, quite honestly, it was something. It was a challenge, it was an adventure, and the idea that they were going to represent their town, of course, was quite something.
The 6th of October 36 came along, and everybody was up, I think, bright and early, because we wanted about an 11 a.m. march off.
The first stop was Chestry Street, and we stopped in the field there, and our cooks made tea and dished out corned beef sandwiches, you see. But the next stop we had was at Ferry Hill. There the miners went to town. We had a half a dozen chefs in white hats, everything all lined on, and a magnificent breakfast laid on at Ferry Hill. And this was the pattern all the way down.
At each stop along the route, the marching men addressed public meetings to raise awareness about Yarrow's plight. And then at night, local councils and trade unions would provide them with an evening meal and somewhere to sleep. Two of the marchers, Joe Simons and Bob Moore, told the BBC in 1977 about the reception they received.
I think when we got into Leeds, we had to come back to this hotel.
And you had a 3-course meal provided and a 3-gill bottle of beer. You know, that in itself was an attraction.
We got well fed, good shoes.
You had a band, didn't you?
Aye, mouth organ band.
What did you do?
Play the mouth organ.
The Guardian newspaper, Tuesday the 13th of October, 1936. The town of Harrogate welcomed the Yarrow marches today. The music of the mouth organ band might have been that of the bagpipes, so surely did it bring the people flocking. There were hundreds of folk drawn up on the slopes around to cheer them, and there was a big banner raised saying, "Harrogate workers welcome the Yarrow marchers." There can be no doubt that as a gesture, the march is a bounding success. There is no political aspect to this march. It is simply the town of Yarrow saying, "Send us work." With the marchers goes the Yarrow Petition for Work, a huge book with about 12,000 signatures.
The spirit of the men was such that we were expecting something. We were expecting to prove to the capital at that time that here's men from Yarrow, the spirit they had shown all the way down. Here we are, we want work, and we are going to put our case that we must have work for the benefit of our wives and children.
But as the men marched south, it started to become clear that their reception in London would not be as enthusiastic as the one they'd received en route.
Conclusions of a meeting of the Cabinet held at 10 Downing Street on Wednesday the 14th of October 1936. The Home Secretary thought that the best method of informing the public, in order to discourage them from furnishing assistance to the marchers, would be to arrange for selected journalists to be interviewed and given material for exposing the origin, motive and uselessness of the Hunger March. The Cabinet agreed an official statement should be issued, designed to discourage such marches and to make clear that ministers could not receive deputations of marchers.
It was clear there would be no meeting with the government. But nevertheless, after 22 days on the road, the men reached London in good spirits, and on the 1st of November they held a public meeting.
There were 200 fighting fit men with it. They'd been marching down there, they'd been well fed all the way down, the fresh air, the exercise. 200 fighting fit men marched into Hyde Park all in their Sunday best.
With the help of their local MP, the marchers went on to present their petition to Parliament. But it went almost unnoticed. No help was offered to create new jobs in Yarrow, as the men had hoped. Instead, they returned home to the unemployment and poverty they'd left. But the Yarrow March had captured the nation's attention, and Sam Rowan believed it did contribute to a change in perceptions in Britain about the responsibilities of government.
If the march achieved anything, it achieved that. It made the condition and lives of people a factor which should always be borne into consideration at top level and not left to work out its own salvation.
The Yarrow Crusade is still remembered in Britain as an act of proud defiance in the face of the mass unemployment and chronic poverty of the 1930s. The last survivor of the march to walk the journey to London died in 2003. You've been listening to Witness with me, Rob Walker, and you can listen to many more of our history programmes online. Just search for BBC Witness.